Alright, everybody. Welcome back to Messenger Guardians Paranormal Investigation Studios. And because I have something really interesting planned for next Friday, I thought I'd do. I'm going to be planning on bringing on others into the show, like I had promised a while back. And I apologize again if sometimes I'm looking towards my screens when I'm talking, and I'm not looking at you all, and I do apologize for that. If it looks like I've got my symbol, I've got merch on. I do. So I am wearing the shameless promotional that I got for the show. Now my newer stuff, when I order again, you'll actually see Investigation Studios in a lighter color and not in the dark color that it turned out to be down here. And I didn't notice it until after I ordered it. But MGP is just fine. I love it. Messenger Guardians Paranormal. But I do have a merch line, and that helps out the channel. Then that's cool. But anyway, I wanted to start off with a personal story that I actually hadn't done, and I apologize. I like the red glow on my face, by the way. I thought I'd tell you guys that. I really do like the red glow, so it's something that I like to use. Blue doesn't seem to work because it comes off too white and it washes me out in a way that doesn't look right. And the lenses I'm using right now are lenses I had with the camera, with the DSLR itself. Over time, I'm probably going to have some better stuff, and that's truly cool, and I don't mind. But what I am going to do, though, is I'm going to see if I can turn off this other light to make it a little bit better. Um, Maybe that'll work better. Oh, you know what? I like that better. so, I wanted to start off with a story from San Francisco. Now, I'm not going to tell you the story. I'm going to show you the story um, of what happened to me in San Francisco. It's in my base memory, which means it exists inside my lucid memory. So hold on and let me get this thing opened up for you all. Hold on. Okay, I got it. So if you noticed that it sounded like the audio went out for a moment there. I mean, really went out for a moment there. It did. It's because I made the audio go out for a moment there while I worked on this so that it wouldn't come up too soon. But I'm almost wondering whether or not I should tell you about it because it goes on for a little bit when you see it here. It's mainly about, like I said, it's stored in my long-term memory mainly because it was a massive lucid events. I believe I have no 100% truth of this, and I'm sure there are brain surgeons watching and people who are into this sort of thing, and who have their own answers, and that's fine and all, and they have their own data, and that's respectable, and perhaps even adds to this. I don't know. But from my point of view, so let's get it that I'm using a particular goggles to go through this. Um, I did not wake up one morning at the Red Victorian around. I would say it was probably, it had to be between 8 in the morning, 8:30 in the morning, and 9 in the morning. That I did not wake up for a length of time. Not that I didn't wake up. If someone were to shake me, I wasn't going to wake up. There was a particular point where I had gone so far from my body and strayed so far that I left. That I was out, I was gone, and what's more, I didn't remember anything about being in San Francisco, but only where I was in what felt like a way station. So let me go ahead and tell you why I was where I was. Not tell you, show you why I was where I was and what I think happened based on what was. And this is a very personal story, but I had already put it out in YouTube, and only a limited number of people ever watch any of these, and that's actually cool and okay. But this is something that, in doing these kinds of shows, I put myself out there. I put out parts of who I am out there. Granted, the paranormal isn't all who I am, nor will it ever be. I've got my crazy side, comedic side, private side, all of that, and they're all mixed in and intertwined with each other. They're not distinct little sides. Sorry about hitting the microphone there. They're not distinct little sides that are inseparable. I'm kind of hoping I don't have so much space above my head, and I don't think I do. But they're not separated sides that can just that live their own separated lives. All those things are actually intertwined, and they touch from time to time, always, just like the air molecules in the air, and perhaps all of our other lifetimes put together, going under the belief that you may see that or believe that we have other lifetimes. Then they're going on continually, past, present, and future, all at once, at all times, in all times, and they're touching, wound around each other, and pressing into each other and touching. They're not distinct little linear lines back and front, past, future. All of time is playing like a ball of massive psychotic, twisted, flicted yarn, all in and over and on itself. A cat would really enjoy that. So let me go ahead and show you this, and hopefully you can appreciate it. Then when we do that, we're going to jump into talking about ITC. I thought I'd take a little classroom kind of thought on this and use some of the materials I did when I taught from class. And when I am teaching about things like that, I don't reinvent the wheel. I give credit where credit is due for those who did the work in ITC, and then we're going to listen, if not the whole thing, then to a portion of a piece of work I did when I constructed when I did the first construction on a ghost box that I constructed through instructions from Steve Huff of Huff Paranormal. Shout out Steve. I'm always going to give you guys a shout out. ITC group and Facebook, I'm going to always give you guys a shout out. ITC Collective, more specifically. So thank you guys. But I'm always going to, and Steve didn't get me started. It was it was another group that got me started that I want to give a shout out to. But again, because I'm trying to remember the name of David's group, because for some reason it slips my memory or slips my mind, I have to bring it back in and think about things. But I try to give everybody a little bit of credit where credit is due, because this really isn't about ego and tons of money. It just really isn't, because once it becomes about those things can be somewhat slightly involved, but once it becomes about and only those things, once those become the larger ideals, the larger things you work off of or a person works off of, once that starts happening, and then that's all your show is, and that's all who you are. I'm going to open up the show on my phone so I can see any texting that comes through, because I can't run the show through my service while I'm putting it out, because if you all had ever seen the first to second show, I believe it caused a massive frame drop of frames, and I just don't want to go through that again. So I'm bringing this up so that I can actually see any text messages that come through. Whether I can answer them or not, I should be able to see them and answer them. But insofar as being able to chat, if there's anyone in chat, hey, please let me know. Let me know, say hello, say you hate me, and then leave the show, whatever. It's interaction. I'm not against it. But I appreciate those who are spending the time here. So let's go over and play this item that I have for you all. Hey everyone, I don't know if you all know, I did a presentation last night at the Red Victorian, another paranormal investigation, and the spiritualist science kind of thing. Of course, you're going to have people who are thinking that those two words are completely opposite of each other, but really, actually they're not. It's just that the definition of the words are misconstrued and missing pieces and parts. But anyway, that's not what I came to talk about today. Making sure that it's running, and it is running. I wanted to tell you about an experience that happened to me not last night, but this morning after I woke up the first time, and then I went back to sleep. And there was only one other person in the room, so I went back to sleep, And I can tell you that I know where I was, but I don't know what happened. And I can tell you that I didn't care about what happened. I at first woke up as if I was on a bed in a room where it was in some place where it was dark, and I was really sad, and it was getting to me, and I felt myself almost start to cry almost. It was just one of those things. I wanted to see my mom. I was really upset. I felt abandoned and alone, but I wasn't sad for very long. The next thing I do remember is I was in a room with other people, and there was this one lady who was really nice to me. Not, I would say, mid-range woman, short, sandy blonde hair, mid-range body. Just, nothing particular. Everything was average, just fine, like it is here in this world. And I remember her talking to me for a moment, and saying something to me about, the people that were there, and mill around and talk to them. It was kind of strange. I had to. I walked around and I saw people who were upset. I saw some people who were just fine, like me. I wasn't quite sure. I knew. Let me put it to you this way: I didn't remember what happened to me. I didn't remember anything about why. None of that seemed important. I didn't even remember San Francisco. All I remember realizing is like, oh, I'm dead. and these other people were gathered around. Like I say, some were upset, and that's kind of when I realized a story started to form. A very strange story. It was a mixture. It was kind of almost alien and Earth human kind of story. It was very strange. There were all sorts of events happening all of a sudden that I could see, almost like a movie screen in front of me. There were events taking place. There were people fighting, escaping, not quite making it, and then ending up really in that space, in that combined space. People fighting who were on different worlds, who were in the middle of a war with each other. Things were going on, and some of the names of these places were kind of familiar because we've used them in our fiction. It was really strange. And then I was back in that room and talking to one woman who was hysterical that she left when she left, and she didn't want to go. And okay, so I'm going to pause for a moment. And only because I need to still clarify a couple of things that I wanted to mention. That these events were stored in my long-term memory, and they're still really strong. This, I believe, was back in 2018, maybe 2019. If it was 2019, it would have been January 2019, early January 2019, which I think it might have been. It would have been the start of the year, so it was right around that time, I think. I could be totally wrong about that, but I think it was. If not, then it was 2018. But I believe it was. I do believe it was January 2019 when this happened, and I was saying the reason why I believe it's stored in long-term memory, and it didn't bleed away as a dream, and it still hasn't all this time on, is that I believe I was really there, and so did my consciousness. My actual consciousness believed it too, and it maintained the entire memory. So when I returned to my body, I returned to it went into long-term memory, long-term physical memory, regular dreams or transfer dreams that are really heavy and transfer a lot of data. Strange. They're like lucids, but they transfer a lot of data, and you have it for a little bit, and then it's completely gone after a while. You won't remember it again. You had better record it, write it down, something, because it might just be in fragments. Those are different. You could have still been there too, or I could have been fed someone else's memories of something, or an alternate reality, or peeked into an alternate reality without really going straight in there with my consciousness. That's happened too, and I came across a story that I did an audio recording on tonight. That not tonight. I didn't do the audio recording tonight. I came across it tonight. It was an audio recording I did back in 2016. But so this every last drop of the memory came back. Every last feeling that I had, every person that I contacted. In fact, one of the people that I contacted, I called, and it was snowing. They were prepping for a snowstorm, so I know this was probably January 2019, maybe even late December, just before New Year, because I was due to put a show on, and I did put a show on. So, and I'm remembering more now what I was doing in San Francisco. I was there a few times, but all of this happened. It was so incredibly deep, and it made sense that I would be called to do what I'm going to describe here, but I really wanted you to understand, because I realized I didn't complete the thought about why, what I was doing, and why I went into long-term memory. I realized, oops, I didn't complete that thought, so I needed to complete that thought for you all.
She was crying, and I was telling her it was going to be okay. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. We're all here now, and it was kind of strange because in a way I didn't want to be the one to soothe these people or have to talk to anybody if I didn't need to. But at the same time, I wasn't bitter or nasty, nothing like that. I didn't feel any of that. It was just kind of odd that I was the one. I still needed to get my feet on the ground and find out why I was being shown all these images of battles taking place and wars and people trying to escape and children who didn't quite make it out of a war zone, and wherever in reality these were taking place. Again, I wasn't reading anything like this before I went to sleep or anything. I didn't read anything. I wasn't watching any films. I wasn't doing any of that. I was tired. I'd done my presentation at the Red Vic. I went and did the dishes as well, because that's a community thing, so I decided I'd go ahead and do the dishes at the end of the night. Not a hard task at all. And then I went up to bed around 1:30 a.m. or something. So, and again, I woke up very vividly in this world. It was definitely not any kind of standard dream. It took a moment for me to figure out, not very long. I said, oh, I left early. I remember thinking that, okay, well, if I left just before turning 50, that sounds like a joke I'd pull anyway. But I wasn't disturbed by it. I knew.
Okay, so there I've placed my age. I placed my age. I said I left just before turning 50, which tells me that this is strange, because I thought I did my presentation in January 2019. I guess I did not. I guess I actually was there in January 2019, but I did my presentation. I guess I did my presentation in January 2018. I'm going to have to get these years straight now, but if I was leaving just before turning 50, it means this was sometime before October 2018, so somewhere in there.
All members of my family would pretty much know in lightning bolt across the country what had happened. And there was one friend of mine, a person I had not seen, who was a professor of mine for years, and back in the early 2000s, and I gave him a call.
I gave him a call from the other side, from where I was, from this way station place,
to tell him what had happened. I called him from the other side, and the first time I made the call out, the phone didn't connect. It dropped. And then I called again, and he picked up. And when I told him, I said, check my Facebook profile. I've passed away. And I said this to him. It was really very strange. It was Teddy I was talking to, and he'll know who he is, because I was the only one person I've ever called that. And I told him to check my profile. I'm gone, and I'm sorry that I had to tell him like that. And he got really sad on the other side. Just, oh, okay. And I said, I'll see you later. And I hung up the phone. On my end, it sounds almost ridiculous. And again, I wasn't reading any stories, and I hadn't done this for days, or hadn't been watching any shows or listening to any. Just hadn't been. I'd been working on a lot of my presentation. They're working on my regular class stuff for Norwich. So I hadn't really been doing any of that other stuff. But as ridiculous as it sounds, I made a phone call to someone from that other side to tell them I passed away. And I'm sorry about that. And it's a friend I hadn't seen in years. And from time to time, he'll chime in wonderfully on my Facebook. He did about San Francisco, about Haight-Ashbury, and wonderful gay history before it was decimated. And didn't erase it; it just decimated it. It's a new kind of history now, gay history now. But anyway, go back to my story and to what I experienced. This vivid, super vivid world I was in. I was in the room, in a large factory-like room, and a part of the room was also like a playroom. It had movie screens, and it had kids' toys and other things. And I didn't go in that room. I just looked over into it. And there were little children playing there. And I realized those were kids who made it over, and they were just being soothed this way.
What I didn't mention and what I wanted to say is, when I remember when I looked over in that room, I was completely familiar with what I was doing, what I was looking at. Because I remember this was the shoulder I looked over to look into the room. And I remember looking back and going, and knowing exactly what I was seeing, knowing what was happening, knowing in a sense of knowing. It's like going to a way station, train station, or an area, someplace you've been many times before, and you totally know the place. You've even worked for them from time to time. So you're so familiar that it's just something that no one thinks twice about. That's how familiar it was to me.
The way they would know, the way that's comfortable for them. And I completely got that when I saw it, without even thinking about it. But I walked to the back of the room and went out a screen door. We were on a farm. And I was okay with being on a farm. It didn't bother me at all. And if you want to know why I keep turning my camera around, it's because I'm checking to make sure it's working. Checking over at the Botanical Gardens and the Spire over there, just in case you all don't believe I'm in Golden Gate Park. I went to the back door, I looked out, and there was a mountain there. This beautiful, tall mountain that reminds me of some of the mountains I see and I saw in some of the mountains I see in western North Carolina, in Wales, in Scotland, and in Alaska as well, in the tail end of Alaska. But I looked up this mountain and I went, there's beautiful shale mountains in heaven. I remember actually saying that. And then someone came up next to me and told me the rock wasn't shale, it was something else, and told me the name of it. And I forgot what it was, but I just went, oh, okay. And I was completely amused by it. And I remember staring at that mountain and being very familiar with it.
So amazing is that I didn't even remember the spot where someone had told me. It was a woman. It was a young lady, as a matter of fact. Well, that's how she projected herself to be. In that world, you project yourself to what you want to be. And if it's the previous identity, or even the identity that you've projected yourself from that's not gone yet, doesn't really matter. Whatever you want to project yourself as is what you are. Let me give you a secret. That's actually how it works here in three-dimensional space too. Shh, but quantum physics has already pointed that out. Okay, so now that I got that off my chest, it was totally amazing. I didn't expect to be corrected about that mountain, or when I thought it was shale rock. When I said the tip end of Alaska, I meant I went the lower. I meant the tail, the lower tail, not the part of the state that goes all the way out. I meant the lower, the back end tail, headed towards the pointed down towards the lower 48. But Southeast Alaska, which is known as Southeast Alaska. That's where I was talking about those mountains, Mount Roberts and those places, Mount Juneau, which because I climbed Mount Roberts during Breadloaf, But that's what came to mind when I saw that place, because I got trapped on the shale at the top of the mountain and managed to make my way over an overhang onto the top of the mountain to head up. And the rest of the people that left me behind, I was not happy with that. It was years ago. It was back in 2004, I think. 2004, yeah, 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, 2003. So yeah, but I've been saying and stopping for and making that reminisce is because it's telling you how it relates to what I knew already. So again, that wasn't really about the Alaska mountain climb or anything like that. It's just that mountain reminded me of that. But the person told me the rock was something different, and it had a different name than what I thought. So even if I thought the mountains in Southeast Alaska reminded me of it, that's not where I was. And I was pretty much correct. Even the mountains, rocks are different. So it's really, if you really think about that, that's truly interesting.
I also remember lying down to go to sleep just to get some rest because everyone was getting me tired. And I remember the lady that I talked about, whoever this woman is, a guardian, whoever, she came into the room.
Which makes sense because they were getting me tired because they were drawing energy from me, wanting to get my attention. And this actually does happen when we're doing paranormal investigation work. This same sort of thing actually takes place and does happen, and you get really exhausted, really tired, even when you're just doing the review work, the everyday stuff like this. You just get so tired because there are others around you who want your attention from that other side, and it can be very draining. And if you're overwhelmed, even in spirit form or quantum consciousness form, whatever you want to call it, I'm not trying to wrap any religious stuff into it because that doesn't do anything really but hold down the meaning and cause all sorts of unnecessary issues. And I'm going to be blunt about that. That's what that really does. And however, it is meant to help with projecting imagery and that makes you comfortable, and that's fine. And that's what religion is used for, projecting imagery that makes it more comfortable. If that works for you, you got to have a frame of reference to in order to understand the world. But that frame of reference has to keep changing, shifting, growing, building, like anything, like from elementary school to 12th grade, the freshman year of college to graduate school, from a bachelor's to an associate's, a bachelor's to a doctorate, from community college to trading school. It doesn't matter. Things have to grow, change, build, rewrite themselves, and reform to make new energy that you can use to project yourself with and to redefine yourself with. So religion has its place, but it being this idea of something unchanging is absurd beyond all get out. And it's truly absurd because nothing is unchanging. Not before, not after, not future, not past, not up, not down, not unchanging at all. And also not amongst the diagonal and amongst the tunnel either, because all those directions I mentioned are the only directions there are. But let's keep going.
And told me that this other woman that I had been talking to is a type 1A personality or something, and that I had to check in on her, and so I didn't get much.
Which means she likes to control everything and everyone, and her physical body passed away while she was out of control. And she didn't have or didn't believe she had control over it.
Rest per se. I went, oh, okay. I'll talk to her, see how she's doing, because she still wasn't dealing with this whole where she was. She wasn't dealing with what had happened to her. Heck, I wasn't sure what had happened to me, but I was in a position to not care, and that's how I felt. That just didn't bother me. She was bothered, and could remember the whole thing. Me, it was almost as if I just took a vacation from where I was, a vacation from this body, from this life. It was very different, and I only remembered a tiny fraction of it, enough to call someone. It was,
but the rest of it I didn't remember. No memory at all of where I physically, what part of the three-dimensional space I came from. None whatsoever, because it wasn't important. I remember realizing it's not really all that important, because the three-dimensional space is nothing more than a projection from that space fifth dimension, sixth dimensional, whatever you want to call it. It's nothing. Three-dimensional solid space is merely a projection built off of all life everywhere, projecting from that space, from that transdimensional energy space, and us trying to recreate that space here, which is almost damn near impossible, because just of the nature of three-dimensional space and the problems it causes, both both quantum conscious level wise or slash spiritually, and then there's religiously because of people's concepts and their dogmas and practices, which is all religion means, and all it is, it's books and it's churches, synagogues and mosques, masjids, and all these other temples and places. Not saying right or wrong. I'm not putting any kind of judgment to any of that. I'm just saying that's what it is. And then you have the physical reality, dealing with the physical reality from the things that look solid clear to the quantum level, which is not solid, and which for the longest time was called the spooky science, because Einstein didn't want to deal with it, and it wasn't the quantum physics wasn't his thing, and that was late 19th, early 20th century when all of that came about, started coming about, right when the spiritualist movement was at its heaviest in its initial birth, 200. Its initial birth was some couple hundred years ago, after they stopped burning people at the stake like me, or enslaving us or whatever. Once people stopped doing that over time, and people started having their own idea about what it is they're doing, what's going on, and start thinking beyond the box, outside of three-dimensional space. Yes, it can be all sorts of silly stories and all sorts of lies, and people can just make things up and completely freak themselves out. And you have books and tons of books just on that alone, on ridiculousness. But people had no frame of reference to talk about a lot of this stuff. It's the same for psychology. There was little or no frame of reference to talk about the things that they were finding disturbed in people's minds, without that connective tissue of quantum reality being connected directly to our psychology itself, and our psychology wanting to break the bounds of these three-dimensional space. And it's horrific events that can cause it to not be ready to do that, horrific traumas and other things that happen to people that cause things to not happen. So folks who might have terrible issues, the one thing I would suggest for folks who have horrible issues and they're on meds and they're on other things is to be very careful about delving into the paranormal work and delving into that space, because you have to keep yourself under as much mental balance and control as you possibly can, in order to not freak yourself out and not overdo something or think something is more than what it is, or to miss something that is a lot more than what it seems, that's right in front of you, but you missed it. It was right there. It was hidden in plain sight. So we're rounding back to that again because of the things that I had to deal with in this space when I went there. I had to deal with people, their psychological issues that they had. They weren't ready, didn't want to leave. Their world was being destroyed. They thought they could do something to stop it and save their homes and save their children and save their people, and those things didn't happen. And they came over with a lot of psychosis, a lot of problems. And they called me in. I'm no psychiatrist, I'm no psychologist either, but they called me in to help deal with it. So on this, again, I'm using the term quantum consciousness for spiritual bodies, light bodies or whatever, or quantum conscious bodies or whatever, our actual bodies, our actual conscious state bodies of energy, of energy and fluctuations and different colors, and those colors do mean something, from the more murky colors to the brighter, shinier ones. And again, it's not meant for you to put a value on what those mean, but they have an energy meaning, and they actually have they actually come from experience and usage and things that are projected out by thought, by word, by deed, those kind of things. Again, not in the sense of any kind of religious punishment issue. All of that has done nothing but murky the waters so badly that it's made the three-dimensional space move even slower. It's just been such a human slog to deal with all these issues in three-dimensional space, which I guess they decided to call me and many others in who deal with that with other people. Don't quite know why, but that was the case. Sorry, I know I keep stopping, but again, this is also what my channel does. I stop and I talk more on things that I'm looking at and analyzing. And if we don't, by the way, get to that other thing tonight, we'll at least get to the front part of it and go into it a little bit, and maybe I'll be able to finish it. We'll see.
Truly an interesting deal. So I went and talked to this woman, and I also sat in a room full of people who were trying to deal with interpretation. So some of them were changing shape and changing form. They were changing into other life forms from other worlds and making contact with each other. Apparently they had also been human, but they had also been on these other places where they looked very different from us, larger creatures than us, and they were trying to figure out what shape they were trying to take. They were upset about where they were and having a hard time dealing with it emotionally, and I had to be in a room full of these people trying to figure themselves out.
It was like looking at some sort of, I can't tell what the painting is. The word Baroque came to mind, but I don't think that that's accurate. But it was like watching them change form from what form they wanted to project as, the life form they knew, or whatever other life forms they saw around them. They were just the colors, and it looked like smearing film as they moved around, like almost like ghostly smearing images as they tried to take these forms and didn't know what form they wanted. They were that confused, and it's not everybody that crosses into that space. It was just those who would be confused enough, who needed and called out for help, that ended up in that space. That ended up in that space. So that was really interesting. So it's hard to describe, but I'm still able to remember it pretty easily.
Maybe it was my therapy, because maybe I was blocking things. I don't know. It was really crazy and very vivid. And again, I was never at any point upset. Slightly amused? Yes. And my character, the way I act now as a person when I'm teaching and when I'm doing stuff and when I'm observing things, is exactly like that there. I was just observing things, amused. Not entirely sure why am I being asked to watch this. It was really interesting, extremely vivid, and I actually don't recall having an experience like this for this extended period of time, for a very long time. Even my near-death experience in 2011 was very short, unforgettable. Never forgot one moment of it because it was very vivid. But that truly was a place where I willed myself out of my body. I was in such terrible shape and had such bad depression. But this case just wasn't the case. It was almost like I was just visiting. And even if I wasn't just visiting, it didn't seem like I would have cared if I came back or not. I just didn't really remember anything other than my friend that I hadn't seen in many years. So I was in a room full of people who were just changing shape and doing things, and that was really odd. And it got to me a bit, and I just left the room, went back off to another side porch into this place that had porches on it. It was strange. But I went out the side porch of this place, and there's the farm again, and there were these people working the farm. I stepped outside. Some of them were human-looking, but they were very large people. When I say large, I mean they were huge, tall. We're talking 9, 10, 15, 12, 15 feet high. They were huge, but they were human. And then there were some who weren't quite. They looked like they were a combination of one person and a smaller person attached to them, almost like a hydra. Really odd looking, but I didn't weird out. I just went, okay. And those who are, and then there were those working around the farm, and a couple of people were working on a machine in a building across from where I was sitting on the porch. I had actually gone out, walked outside, realized I wasn't wearing any shoes, and the insects started to they were everywhere. The insects were buzzing all over the place and crawling all over the ground, and I thought to myself, okay, I shouldn't be out here without shoes, so I'm going back to the porch. Went back to the screened-in porch, sat down, looked out over at the other building, and these big guys, these huge guys, were working on a machine, and they screwed it up. And they dropped their tools, said, oh no, and they ran, and I put my fingers over my ears, and the machine exploded in a bunch of little pieces. And the one guy, big, tall, bearded guy, said,
okay, we'll get back to the big, tall, bearded guy and how angry he was that the machine exploded, and how he blamed all the other ones. But I talked to a friend of mine about the feet thing, about how come I kept getting swarmed whenever I'd be outside, whenever I put my feet out on the ground outside the porch area, and I'd walk around and suddenly I'd just get swarmed by insects. And she immediately said, because you couldn't walk too far away from there, you weren't ready to go yet. And if you'd walked too far away, you wouldn't have gone back to your body. You would have just moved on. Because you weren't supposed to go yet. That bare feet symbolizes passing away, symbolizes this construct we call death, but it's really a terrible misnomer. But you weren't ready yet. You weren't supposed to. That wasn't your job. Not right now. That wasn't what you were supposed to do. And a wonderful lady friend, I'm going to call out to her. But thank you, and say thank you for that. Yeah, that I thought about that, and that was the first thing that came out. But I thought I'd tell you that to add to that. Now let's get back to that. What happened to that machine? What happened to that doctor? Not doctor. What happened to the guy? He got mad at these other dudes for blowing up this machine. It's very amusing. Let's get back to that.
Yeah, this is what happens when you do it wrong. Look at this. And he picked up a piece of the machine and went, one and done, and threw it down. He actually said, one and done. And I was amused by that. They were farm workers. They were doing stuff around this place. So wherever this place was, there were others kind of living a life in that space and doing things in that space. So I was completely amused by that. But I remember thinking, okay, so I'm probably going to get used to wherever this place is. And then I went back inside and I went looking for a professor friend of mine, not the one I was talking about, but another one who, believe it or not, I only recognized and remembered him for that place. He's not someone I know here in this life over here. He's not someone I know here. But I found him. And I said to him, because we were waiting for him in a room, made him to come in and give a lecture. I said, are you going to keep playing this professor role for very long? We're all in there waiting for you, by the way. And I knew the guy, knew his face, knew his name, and he knew me. But again, in this lifetime, I don't know him. I've never seen him before. But there, I totally recognized him as if he were my best friend in the world. And I was just bantering him.
You know, that's wild because I have no memory of who this person is. I don't remember who he was. I don't remember that part of the story, but I'm glad I heard it again. For whatever reason, that slither didn't stick with me as much as all the rest of the stuff did. But it is exactly how I would act in this life in physical form. But amusing. And the giants, minus the one that looked like a hydra and looked like it had another human or humanoid form growing off of it. Don't know what that life form was. But minus that one, the rest of them looked like the giants that have been described and whose remains have been found on Earth over and over again, to include in Ohio and all these other places where the remains of giants have been found. And then you have the stories of giants that are told, and that definitely is a thing and has been a thing, and as absurd as it sounds, it's a thing. So I thought I'd go ahead and mention that as well. But I realized that, though, only after I came out of it, that those guys, most of them, were actually familiar. They had been people on Earth at one time, and they had looked just like that and were that size. They were huge beings or whatever, but they had their jobs and they had things to do. And our mythologies have created all sorts of stories out of them, from Jack and the Beanstalk and fee fi fo fum and dumb crap like that, to the biblical giant stories. So to the ones from the Mahabharata and other cultures who talked about them. So yeah, cultures that weren't supposed to have anything to do with each other. It's not true. They all had something to do with each other, but were told, oh, it developed independently. No culture on this planet had developed that independently of each other as much as they might want it to. They had some influence on each other somewhere, but the influence is such wide apart that the influences would not be that exact as they were for so many other cultures. It's an incredible history that we only have yet to touch in regards to what's been going on Earth, and very interesting. But let's get back to my professor friend.
But in all of this, I kept remembering that there was some sort of huge conflict between other worlds. It's not necessarily, I'm not talking about Earth necessarily, but there was some other things going on, and this whole thing kept referencing back to where all these people were coming from, and while they were coming to this location where I was, not in San Francisco, but in the space where I was, where this vivid, you can call it a vivid dream, but again, I think that I had actually, almost as if I had been called to the other side to temporarily stand in for someone who was off somewhere, and trying to fight something, or trying to help people get out of the way of something, or to pass quickly. I would just say that it's a terrible injustice, to understatement, to say that death is an illusion. It is not what everyone thinks it is. That's an understatement. That's an understatement, and an injustice to understatements, to make that statement. I did not expect to have this event. I've had vivid events happen before, very vivid. So I believe that I've probably jumped over to this similar space before, except this time I was actually being interactive with everyone there and other people, and the lady who seemed to be a guardian, but she was a guardian to so many, and she was kind of director of the program, but for some reason I was one of her assistants, and she just needed my help. And it was really kind of strange. I realized, okay, I'm doing exactly the same thing that when I woke up, I realized I was doing exactly the same thing there as I do here. Helping out Red Victorian people, checking in if they need help, or if I'm someplace else and folks need help, I'm always the one to step up and help with the situation. This is not something I try to do, it's just something that is. And it's not something I always want to do, but it's there. It's really strange. But
I wanted to say to you guys, and man, this is a serious shout out to the Red Victorian. As far as I know, they did not survive COVID. As far as the business itself, I don't know the details, and I would never put them out there anyway. But it didn't survive, and it was a wonderful, incredible communal sharing space, hostel, just a brilliant place. I stayed there 3 times. I believe that was my second time that I stayed at the Red Victorian, and then I went back in June of 2019. I went back to the Red Victorian. Just such a brilliant place. I went back towards the later end of June 2019. Brilliant place, wonderful place. Hats off to David, to Big Dave, wonderful guy, love him to death. And I just wanted to do a shout out. I was doing a paranormal. I did a presentation in 2018. Apparently, this is when this was. I did a paranormal investigation on how to do it, kind of work there, and not an actual investigation that would have come next, but as you can see, it never happened. It was never going to happen because of COVID. But so many things happened there that was so incredible and so wonderful, as far as just meeting people and having experiences. I would have liked to have had more, but it was definitely something that meant a lot to me. And I wanted to give a shout out to the Red Victorian in Haight-Ashbury, in the Haight-Ashbury area of San Francisco. I really wanted to give a shout out to that. It's I hope something like it still exists there, or maybe they come back somehow as something else similar, but definitely an experience that it's like none other.
But I remember thinking to myself, well, I remember what age I was when I left. I was 49 and shortly short of 50 by a couple of months. Less than a couple of months. So I went, okay, so I left early. I didn't leave at age 86. I decided to leave early. What I had been missing was that I wasn't leaving permanently unless I wanted to, unless I chose to leave permanently, because I had no memory of my life here. I would say about 99% of no memory. Not where I was teaching, not what I was doing, not even what city I was in before when I left to come over there, nothing. Because none of it seemed to be important. It just wasn't important in the moment. Everything else was, though, and I was being asked to help out. And it was a temporary trip that I took, apparently. Because then I woke up, and I woke up 2 hours later than I ever would have woken up here. And I realized just how vivid it was. It didn't go away. It didn't fade. It took me another hour and a half to tell you all about it after I got my thoughts together. I was going to Facebook Live this, but I didn't really want to do that. I didn't want to have to take that chance, and I don't really care what people say about it. And if people decide that I'm not worthy of it being their friend because, I took seriously what must have been a ridiculous dream, okay, then you and I have no more to say in this lifetime. Then that's the space you're in, that's the space you're in. This is the space I'm in. But I realized decades ago that what was called vivid dreams were actually trips out, where we left the body we're in for a moment and we returned to whatever dimensional space we actually exist in, as a kind of superconscious that split itself into trillions of countless versions of itself. We call I've heard called individuations or whatever, and then we simply exist as if we're separate of each other, but we're really not. We're really the same people down there, the children over there, the birds flying in the sky, the ants crawling on the ground, the roaches. We're really just individuations of the same energy. But who's going to have fun with that? Let's just pretend like we're all separate and doing separate things, and because that's how you amuse yourself, I suppose. It's truly amazing. I'm not remotely religious about any of this stuff.
That's how one consciousness actually amuses itself, because otherwise it would just be all alone. So yes, that's how we as one amuse ourselves, by creating all sorts of drama amongst ourselves, or amongst and within ourselves, for ourselves. It's really interesting. I hope you all are still following along with this.
I'm not applying any religious notions to any of it, because it doesn't work for me that way. For those it does work for that way and they have to apply that kind of stuff, okay, go for it. And if that works and that's the only way you can deal with it, do a Jesus name drop or Krishna name drop or Allah name drop or Muhammad or Buddha, whoever. That's cool. Then perhaps those entities or those fractions or those individuations will make a presence known, because that's the only thing that will make you comfortable. Then so be it. Then that's what happens, and that's the space you are in. It's already well known and understood that sort of thing doesn't make me particularly impressed one way or the other. I don't mind them. I'm not impressed by them and awed, because that's just not how I operate mentally. So I guess you can say that space takes the shape of how you operate mentally and where you are. And also it takes a combination shape, combined of everyone's thoughts in the room. So it was a very weirdly shaped place on what seemed to be an entirely separate planet that was or some section of a world that was farming, large farming with people who were really strange farmers and interesting, but they had outbuildings and everything, and it was quite interesting. It was a kind of arid place, but it was really super nice. It wasn't uncomfortable weather-wise. The mountains were beautiful. It was just crazy, and I remember sitting and just feeling everything, feeling where I was. And this was no pinch me, I'm dreaming. This was nothing like that. It was crazy, and I know I probably could have stayed, but I just realized something was off about that too. I probably just couldn't in that moment, and so I didn't. I came back, and I told one person that I passed.
That much was obvious. I mean, I'm sitting right in front of the screen. I think just as a dramatic plot point is why I said it. But yes, it's totally Captain Obvious. That character is not owned by me, by the way, just so everyone knows.
And I don't even know why I did that. I think I did that as an insurance policy. But I'm almost certain that one person probably didn't receive that call over here. I think I did that to make myself feel better, to reach out to just one person. It's really strange, but I think that had I made it permanent, I would have actually done more to reach out to others from that end, from that side, from that dimensional space, to say that I really was okay, and I'm no more quotes dead than the bird flying in the sky up there. The whole death thing is probably one of the biggest tales you can be told about something. I would say if you're running a scam, then the whole death industry is a scam. So anyway, it's one big scam to freak you out, and then when you realize you've been lied to and you've been had, you're already on the other side.
So that's pretty much where I am. This is gonna finish. I'll promise you I'll finish it off. And then I'm not entirely sure I'm going to slip into. I knew that showing you all this, and it's only 15 minutes and change. What is it? No, 25 minutes and change or something. I knew that it was going to actually take up way more time than I might normally take up. So what I may end up doing is just going over another piece of something that I can do that's really short to show you again some of the more interesting EVPs. It'll give you a little bit of a taste for what I was going to do or what I'm going to do, and I know what to show you. I know exactly what I'm going to show you right after this to give you a taste of what I'm going to show you, and then maybe go 5 minutes in to the third piece and then stop because I want to wet your whistle and show you where I'm going to go. And then next week, if we won't go there, we'll make that an 8th show. Next week will be the 7th one, and I've got some special people coming along that we're going to be doing a good, interesting show on. I won't mention it now, just in case technical difficulties make it change again. But yeah, you see where I am, and honestly, it hasn't really changed all that much. This is again another thing that our channel does is you get to look into my mind psychologically on a 3-dimensional space level. Psychological, you get to look into, or you get into look into my brain. You get to look and see where it fires off and where you think it doesn't fire off. You get that psychiatric look too. But I'm on no medications or anything like that, and I wouldn't call myself a ghost whisperer or anything like that. I do tend to feel and to pick up on certain things and to understand certain things, but I refuse to go in front of a huge giant audience and then start telling them about their quote dead relatives, things like that. Doing cold and hot readings on people, which is all that is, for a lot of people who are just pulling your chain. I'm not into pulling people's chains and making tons and tons of money off of BSing people, because ultimately all of the energy that comes from knowing that you were psyching people out and messing with them, and 70% of it wasn't true, and you knew it wasn't true, that energy comes back to bite you in the back end all over again. And I don't mean that again in any religious sense, because that's not how that works. It just comes back. It's like when I was a kid, and for anyone who's in my family who could be watching, who got this far and didn't bore out, I mentioned this today to a friend of mine I was having dinner with outside, and yes, finally, those things are starting to roll back to normal all over the country, and not just up here where I live in Vermont. But and I said, I remember at 5 or 6 years old, a kid walking up to me in the apartment complex where we lived, and it was a widespread complex in Maryland. And this boy, I can't tell you how old he was because he was just bigger than me. That's all you know when you're 6, because your common frame of reference is small and big. That's the frame of reference when you're trapped inside a physical body and having to grow through that stupid little thing. Anyway, walked up to me and punched me in the stomach as hard as he possibly could. Just landed me one in the stomach. And the only thing that I remember thinking was, other than being really uncomfortable and being winded, was, I mean, nowadays the language, the wording I can put to it now is, what do I do with this? I didn't tell my mother. I'm almost certain I didn't. I don't think I told anybody else either. I just didn't say anything. It's like the kid did it on a bet. He walked over to me and landed a punch straight into my stomach, my 6-year-old stomach. 5 or 6, something like that. Never forgot it. This was back in maybe 74. I would say it was 74. Because I was born at the latter end of 68 in October. So it was definitely probably around 74 when this happened. And I never forgot it. It is laid still in my brain, and not far from it lays in my long-term memory, but not buried. So yeah, there are things that I remember that were traumatic for me that I don't talk about. Certainly not on video, but that was one that I can talk about because I remember not knowing what to feel in regards to that. And I said to my friend today, maybe that was just a karma thing. Maybe I did that to someone or was doing that to someone in some other concurrent lifetime that's running along this one, and I've hurt someone. We all play the roles. We all play the darkest to the lightest roles. When I say darkest to the lightest, I'm not talking about skin color, whatever. Those don't even mean the same thing. I mean, as far as darkest intentions to lightest and greatest intentions. Darkest to worst, lightest to greatest. If I did something like that to someone, then I probably wanted to know what it was like to have done such a thing. Just that alone. And that's probably something like that may have happened to me many times, taking different forms and doing different things. But that's something that struck up in me, something that I remember, something that I'm like, I do wonder, did this really happen like this? So yeah, that's really interesting. It's definitely, it was interesting. I thought I'd relay that because it mattered and it came up today in conversation. And I thought about it and went, wow, wait a minute, this came up in conversation. I need to relay this. It's amazing when these episodes come together for me. I don't know they're coming together until until I'm sometimes 20 minutes, a half hour out from starting the show. And other times I've been planning them for 2 or 3 days. I had a show that I was going to do, but it turns out that we weren't technically ready for it yet, and the other person wasn't available yet, so here we were. But again, I had other things that I needed to put out there that tells you my intentions, that shows you what my intent is and who I am. It might not make you think one way or the other whether or not I'm crazy, but then what is crazy? How are we defining that? Let's annotate that. Let's pull apart what that word means. Let's define it depending on what century we're in. Oh, and now let's see what it is. Where does it sit in the sentence when it's being used at a person? What's the social backdrop of the sentence itself? The backdrop of both the people or a group of people speaking. What is it? How do we define it? So it's interesting. Oops.
Anyway, or over where you truly, where your consciousness actually exists, or where it makes another world for itself, or the tales you can be told about something.
Let me back up a little bit. That's what I just did.
I would say if you're running a scam, then the whole death industry is a scam. So anyway, it's one big scam to freak you out, and then when you realize you've been lied to and you've been had, you're already on the other side. Anyway, or over where you truly, where your consciousness actually exists, or where it makes another world for itself, or interacts with others. This is why I do the work that I do, and why I don't care if it's unpaid. It's not that kind of thing for me. I mean, if someone sponsors me to come and do a large talk and I get paid doing that, that's one thing. But insofar as clients and helping people out, no, there's no money going on in between that. I really felt like I needed to say this to talk about it. I felt like I needed to talk about it and not keep it to myself.
Let me clarify the thing on clients and stuff like that. That still hasn't changed. What I'm referencing is that if somebody calls me and they need help, they need me to come check something out, it's my time, my dime, I will do it. And I'm not charging people to go and research their homes or whatever. The likelihood is that actually has an intake. and intake of information. Sometimes they send me information about their home and about where they are, and they send me images and send me video, stuff like that. And that's the kind of thing I look at first. I would never present that kind of thing on here unless they intentionally send it and say, could you please put this on your show and analyze it. And for those out there who wonder whether I do that or not, yes, I do. All you would have to do is send me an email. Send me through my at messengerguardiansvermont@gmail.com and make a request to me. And if you want your information, or if you want your data on the show, video, that kind of stuff, I will then give you a link to drop it into the Google Drive for that email, into a folder where it can go to, and then I can you tell me the details you want me to talk about, what you want me to call it, and I'll analyze it live on this show. I'll actually do an analysis on this show of that information. If I can't physically get out to your place, then I'll have you. I can have others do the information. If it's nearby and it's somewhere I can get to, and I can call up one or two people to crew me out to get me out there, to get me up to the locations. Great, we'll all do it. We'll come, but again, it takes intake data. Talking over the phone, email, trying to get a form together that MGP can use, and that's the kind of thing you look for. You look for that kind of intake data. You don't just go first, because there's been an incident where a client did call and they were having issues, and it really turns out that even though they were having issues, one of them had brought in the issue they were having. One of them had done a ritual, and they weren't clear about this, where they had brought something in, and their own issues, their own psychological issues with themselves, made it even worse. And there was a lot of dishonesty going on, come to find out. And the person thought they were in trouble because they had told me all of this, and they thought for some reason they were in trouble because they felt like they had actually hoodwinked me or were trying to. I never went out to the location, although I was actually pretty nearby in relative terms. It wasn't over the Canadian border. I could have gotten to it. But they didn't hoodwink me. I just kept questioning them, and then getting the right members who are pseudo members of my team to psychologically delve into the information and deal with it and project to that location, like I sometimes try to do, to see what I'm dealing with. And ultimately it came down to people brought in entities and things they shouldn't have, or brought in the energy that would drive those energies to them. Negative thoughts, negative things that were happening, really bad stuff, and actually brought things in intentionally that the other person didn't know about, and brought those things in, and then played off on the other person living with them. That, and turns out this haunting that was going on was brought in by that other person. Was actually, they brought in these items where these energies attached to, and on purpose, just so they could do horrible stuff and split them up, do things. And that, I forget how that got discovered, but it was someone else on my team who's, who doesn't do stuff for me so much, but who said there's something wrong with this, something's off about what these people are asking. And so I let that piece of data, that piece of information coming to me, shape the next set of questions that I asked. And then it all broke down, and I was glad I didn't go out there, because it would have then become very much worse. Whatever was attached and brought into the house might have found its way to attach to me. Things have attached to me before, but not horribly negative things. I had some negative things that live in my space before roommates, that things as far as entities and others, that it's on my site, and I even brought it up on my last video. At least I think I did, where I've had things, who trip between the bathroom and this bedroom, and like to speak and say things and do stuff that's just unnerving. But at the same time, I'm not afraid of them. They might unnerve me for a second, but I'm not really. They're not getting my fear energy and feeding off of that, if that's what these energies do. But you've got to have an intake, a way of intaking information from people. to find out what their needs are, to get a sense of what's happening, to make sure you're not being pulled in. It's not foolproof. You could still get pulled in to something that's dishonest, but you have to make sure you have an acquired sense of where you can tell when something's wrong. In this kind of profession, and it is a profession, even if it doesn't really pay out for those of us who do it honestly, even if the clients we get are the public clients are free, but people who ask you to come and do a seminar or something, they generally will gift you something, money or some object or something. And it's not a heavy payout. It's not some big thing. And even if it ever turned out to be, what I did at Red Victorian was totally free. That was for me. But if it ever turned out to be that thing, it's not always a large sum. It's not. The money does not seem to matter. If it goes back into paying the people and helping the people out who help you, and building your profession and building your workstations and building your stuff and going back in and helping people, then that's what it goes into. If you get money from the occasional person who wants to help you, ask you to come in and teach a show, do a show, talk about ITC and things like that. So money in and of itself isn't bad. It's what's been done with it and how much importance it's been given in the societies we have that has led to where we are. We've imbued energy into that damn concept to where we've made it one of the most destructive concepts on earth. But it doesn't mean it's always destructive. I get paid for teaching in college. I can't do that for free. I've got to pay rent and those kind of things. But I don't need money. I mean, that's what I would prefer to do if I'm going to use money for something. This I do as a hobby, as something I love, and would like to give as much of myself out for it as possible, for little or nothing. So, because it feels so much better when you're not burdened with that kind of thing. If later on money gets involved because you get a lot of followers and streaming services pay out for ads and pay out for other things, that's a whole different aspect, but it's not something that's feeding this channel. What comes is what comes, but always call to the mat when people don't tell you about themselves. Don't get on and do the radio shows where they say, look, I can only do 10 episodes every so often because it's draining. I can't just keep doing it, and the money isn't worth it. It's not any of that. Even if the money was worth it, your health, psychological, and all these other things, your health is what matters in this kind of field as well. You can't freak yourself out. You can't go into it tired. You certainly can't go into it after a drink. And then start talking about paranormal and doing investigations. You can't, whatever you do when you're in between this sort of stuff is one thing. And there's something here with me because I can feel it. Whatever you do in between, in larger spots in between, is your business. But when you're doing the work in the moment, don't do anything that makes your body create a distraction. And so those are the kinds of things you want to stay away from while you're doing the work in the active moment. I'm not talking about having a beer with dinner or whatever, like I did during the early evening when I had dinner with friends or whatever. That, of course, but that doesn't affect what I do right now. That was hours and hours ago. So just be mindful of what you do so that you're not distracted. No different than when you're teaching. You'd never drink before you start teaching a class or whatever. At least all things being equal, you wouldn't. All things being equal, but they're not. So it's a thought that I give, and again, this is. I added the descriptions to our channel last week as to the kind of things that we'll be talking about, and I'm sure that will shift, will evolve, will grow, will mutate, negative connotation, but it's not negative. It'll flow like water in an anti-gravity situation where it's just this bubble of water. You tap it and it pulls apart, and maybe those globules hang around and maybe they just join back together. Maybe there's a little bit of gravity with that water. But what's interesting is that this is what we do. We talk about these kind of things on this channel too. We go into these kind of subjects, so it's not unknown. And whether it's Twitch or YouTube or what have you, this is the sort of thing we do with this type of channel. So let me go ahead and finish off. and the likelihood is that I'm going to still try to tease you. I think I'm still going to try to tease you all with what we're doing, what we're going to ultimately end up doing a little bit down the road, but won't be next week. And I want to be able to tease you with that. So let's just finish off, and we'll do that tiny bit of a teaser before we close out for the night. This will be a short show tonight, which again, I don't make that plan, but I do try to keep it to at or below 2 hours. And if we can go at 1 hour and a half, 1 hour 30, oh, that is 1 hour and a half. But if we can keep it lower than 2 hours, that's great. All right, let's do this.
I wasn't expecting it to happen right after one of these events. I wasn't expecting any of that. So I just wanted you all to know what took place. So, and then I did suddenly come back, and I woke up very easily. I wasn't groggy or anything. I just opened my eyes and looked around and went, well, I guess I decided to come back. I mean, that's how I felt. Remembered I was in San Francisco, that I was at the Red Victorian, and I realized that I came back. I wasn't upset like I was the first time when my near-death experience happened, when I was not pleased to return when I came back, which I talk about in my radio stuff, and there's links to that. If I don't have any links to it in there, but I think my radio program has links in Messenger Guardians Facebook page, or I'll put it on my page, my main page. But I just came back and said, well, I decided to come back.
That's a SoundCloud file, so what I'll try to do is take the SoundCloud link, which I have on one of my teaching pages, and I'll move it, or not move it, I'll copy it into my YouTube, and I'll also see if I can place a copy of that in my Twitch as well, in my Twitch description as well, for those who want to listen to my radio interviews and stuff like that I've done for national shows and local shows here in Vermont.
What do you know? I wasn't upset. I was kind of neutral, but neutral good. Feeling okay. And was like, oh, that's interesting. What a trip that was. And I guess I didn't want to stay. But I realized how easy it would have been if I decided to, but all in all, it really wasn't time. So here I am, and I'm back. I thought I'd put that out there, and for folks who think I'm crazy and off my tough, well, great. I guess I can be tied down and iced and lobotomized and shock therapied and everything else, where people who cannot handle alternate realities and other things that might be the case, and that we don't have all the information, would rather just torture us into being in a three-dimensional space, locking it down and believing that this is all there is. Okay, if that makes you feel good, then that's the space you're in. It's not the space I'm in. With that, everybody, I'll say be well, go carefully. This is Glenn A. Sewell. I'll talk to you all later, and I'm also going to share this on Messenger Guardians Paranormal. Be well, everyone.
Okay, so let's think of ITC. Let's think of electron. Let me open the file. See all the minutiae directly. So I don't split what I'm talking about. To have to witness all. All right, so let me go over here, and then let me go ahead also and do this. And so instrumental transcommunication. And the definitions for that, what that is, and of course in small writing is actually me just using sources. And this wasn't a write-up that I was publishing. This is something that I was just using for a class that I was teaching, and I went into talking about the sources and talking about the things that I do and what I use, and the kinds of books at the time I was doing this little course, the kinds of books that I was suggesting for people. To start with, Ghost Hunting for Beginners by Rich Newman, a 2012 edition. We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death by Sandra Champlain, 2013. Talking to Heaven, a medium's message up to life after that death, and that's James Van Praagh. And James Van Praagh was one of the people that the Ghost Whisperer was based on. And the other person, I'm suddenly just losing my head because of the name of the book, and I loaned it out and talked about it a lot. And now suddenly the fourth book is out of my head, and I'm kind of surprised I didn't include it here, which doesn't make any sense. Yeah, so I'll think about it, and I'll probably think about it as soon as this stream ends. I'll end up thinking about it. It'll totally come to mind what it was I wanted to show you and what it was I was talking about. So when I built Steve Huff's the spirit box that he had built, and we built it using his instructions. I built it using his exact instructions. I didn't go cheap on the things that I needed to buy. I bought the exact brands of everything I needed to buy, and it worked straight off. It really did. I haven't used it all that often because I'm not living alone now, and I don't really want to bring anything in while I have other folks with me. I just don't want to do that. I'll go somewhere else with it because it has a battery pack that's on it that I can take it and work it elsewhere. And yes, there's always a possibility that someone follows me back, but I can handle that a little bit better than to opening an energy portal in my own home and them walking through and not knowing whether I've closed it or not for sure. I mean, I understand how to do it, but it doesn't mean it's going to completely work. And while I've got other people around me, I don't want to put anyone in any kind of projected danger. Right now, I don't know if they'd be in danger at all, but there's no sense in taking that kind of chance when you do this kind of work. So and this would be the thing that I'm going to get us into. It says class 2, but it's just me doing transcommunication class where I'm just teaching how to do it, and I even go into not just the brief history that also involves my hometown, which is in the reference point right here. My hometown. Let me bring that up a little bit close before I show you this last little piece of video that I want to show you. Let me bring this up. I can't remember if it's. I hope I do this right. Oh God, I'm doing it right. Good. Okay, good. Let me bring this right here. Now, this is the town I'm from. I was not born in this town, but I'm from it. In 1982, Sarah Estep founded the American Association of Electronic Voice Phenomena. So, that page I brought up, I do believe that was the page that I brought up last week. In Severna Park, Maryland. Never knew anything about it, by the way. Graduated from high school in '87. Never knew about what this place was. I guess I just wasn't ready to know anything about any of it at the time. I had a basic understanding and belief. I say belief. It's more of a. Okay, let me go back to the word understanding. It's more of a basic understanding of what all that meant, and a basic agreement that some of it is real, and maybe sometimes more than some of it. But belief sounds more religious, and it's not really. Belief is generally based in life experience, in real life, in actual life. Belief is truly based on your actual living events and the things in your life that have brought you to value what you value. That's what belief really is. But a lot of people take belief to be religious belief. It's not. That's all surface stuff anyway, but it's not. Belief has to actually do with life experience and actual things that have happened to you, not things people told you that happened to someone else, that happened to someone else, that happened to someone else, that might have happened to someone else, that changed, it may have happened to someone else, and that your preacher said, and that your mama said, and that your dad said, and that your best friend's neighbor's aunt's boyfriend said. Those kind of things don't really make belief. They don't make belief up at all. Belief is made up quite often, but really what we value, our core value, is what we understand, and those come from our life experiences. So, Severna Park, Maryland, a nonprofit organization with the purpose of increasing awareness of EVP and teaching standardized methods for capturing it. And Estep began exploring EVPs in 1976 and says she's made hundreds of recordings of messages from deceased friends, relatives, and other individuals. And that came from Wood Live's Sci-Fi TV, which is a link. I just left a link where I picked these up from totally unexpected, did not know this, and was so floored by it, I had to include it. But in analyzing doing that kind of analysis work didn't start with her. It goes way back in time when this sort of thing was worked on, quite some distance. So there is an entire history behind this, an entire history. So I just put together stuff that people would sign on to, and they'd look at it, and it's all information that I cite. I talk about pareidolia, the brain's ability to find patterns. Yes, you're going to have that from time to time, and when you realize that you're trying too hard to hear something that's not there and the machine isn't picking up, stop trying to do anything with it, because it becomes this sort of situation. But when you have more than one person that completely not only hears it like you do, independently of you, but it's really obvious what's being said, then it's not pareidolia, and that cannot be used as a psychological excuse to push aside data as possible evidence. And there is a difference between data and evidence. So definitely. So it's something that a lot of folks seem to not understand, that there is a difference between those two things. So that it's understood. So definitely, let me give you a quick look at what we're going to do. This is just a quick look, and then I'm going to end the show, and we will come back to this, I promise. You can even email me and say, hey, you promised to go back to it and you didn't. Remember, this is the kind of show. You can do that. You can say that. You can call me out. And so I want to be able to show you what it is we're going to end up doing. So I want you to be able to listen. Have a listen. This is my first time that I did Steve Huff's box, his spirit box. And Steve, thank you once again, especially if I'm not getting right what you called it, not we. I had nothing to do with it. But I did have something to do with wanting to build one for myself and follow Steve's instructions and really get started on this kind of work. But I got started on this work 3 years before this, with my friend David's show and his work, and I'd known David at that point for 25 years almost. So David, when I can be in my right mind and remember what the show is called, I'll let everybody know. And I apologize for not remembering, but my brain works that way where it hiccups all the time. But have a listen for just a few minutes and see what you can hear. I will not stop to talk about it until we actually do the show and we do the whole thing. And it's going to take a while to get through it. I actually have notes for these, but I don't know if I can find them, and I'm okay if I don't find them, because I want a fresh perspective on what I picked up. And Steve, this was if you're out there listening, this was the first time I used the box. So here it is. All right, everyone. Glenny's tool, Messenger Guardians. I'm using 2 recording devices. I'm using the HD cam. Set at a slightly weird angle because I don't have a tripod right now. Oh, and by the way, that box, if anyone was here for the episode for the Cecil Part 2, I think I pulled out this box and showed it to you guys. So it's right here below the table. It does still exist. It does still work. It's not the best of the best. It's not the top of the top now, but still works for what I do. And I have an EVP detector. Now, if it gets too close, of course, it's going to go off because of the EM field coming off of the portal. So it can't be that close. So when I show it, I'll just show it to the camera if there's any movement. And I also have a digital recorder that I'm going to be using for a secondary recording device. I'll put that right next to the camera. It'll start recording now. The camera has a 20-minute stop on it. I'll have to push it again if it goes longer. But I'm using SCD1, I just did Omani Padme Hum for an entire hour and a half, Buddhist chant, and let me explain. I know I said I wouldn't stop, but this bears out. I did a Buddhist chant, the Omani Padme chant, because it makes me feel good, not because I'm Buddhist necessarily, but the energy it produces when I do it works for me, so that this would work for me better, so I could get my energy, my quantum energy aligned, and my quantum consciousness energy aligned with what I was doing, so that I wouldn't bring in as much negativity, because there were things that came in that shouldn't have been there, but somebody else was there watching with me, and that'll take time to explain, and I'll show that for the next episode. For Deva Premal, from Deva Premal, I've just been piping it. Name drop, Deva Premal. And everything's been calm, and no dark spirits can come, no unsettling spirits can be here. Nothing negative. So we'll go ahead and hook up SCD1, which is on right now, and we'll record and see what's going on, see who is here with us. I won't turn on reverb or echo, of course, because there's no need to put those on. At least I don't think so. Is anyone here? Is anyone with us? Let's use the reverse sweep.
Well,
see if anyone's with us. Anyone with us?
Steve.
Does anyone want to speak?
Many channels. Oil. Just go.
Just go. Go where? Who's speaking?
I'm guys.
My God. Okay. I don't. There's a deal. Favorite. Yeah, First aid. Full run. Has been.
Has been. Well, that's just a taste, and I wanted to give you all that taste. That was 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 59 seconds. Wanted to give you all that taste of what's coming. There's actually two of these files. One is a 15, one is a 20 minute. And but I wanted to give you a big taste of what it is I was going to be doing, and why I was going to be doing it, and just show you that. And